I welcome you to another section of our class. This is Module 5, which implies that this is the 5th video for this course. So we'll be having another, after this video, we'll still be having another extra videos to make it 10 modules for this course. And in this module, we'll be looking at the topic data collection methods and tools. In our previous module, we looked at sampling techniques and the likes. So now we'll be moving on to data collection methods and tools, where we'll be illuminating ourselves on how to gather evidence, on how to gather data that could be used for our analysis or for our research. So this topic is what we can still refer to as gathering evidence for rigorous research. So that is data collection methods and tools. What are those tools that we can use to gather data and to collect data? So now we have the contents of the module to be, we'll be looking at firstly, primary and secondary data in research. We justify that. So after that, we move on to questionnaire design and administration procedures. After that, we move on to interview techniques and development of interview guides. And after that, we also move on to observation methods in research. Then we also look at secondary data sources and documentation methods. Then also look at validity and reliability of data collection instruments. And finally, we'll be looking at writing data collection methodology and tool description before we now move on to the concluding part for this module. If we look at these topics very well, these are the topics that these are the subtopics that we can actually treat under this topic for this course, data collection methods and tools. So now let's move on to the introduction to the module. We'll be introducing ourselves to the meaning of data collection. Data collection, it represents the systematic process of gathering, measuring information on variables of interest, forming the empirical foundation upon which research conclusions rest. So data collection is, just as the name implies, it has to do with collecting of materials, collecting and gathering of informations that is of variable interest, which forms the empirical foundation upon which research conclusions rest. This is to tell you that data collection is the foundation. It is the empirical foundation to which everything about research, everything that we'll be doing in a research rests on. So now when we are talking about, let's move on to the landscape of data collection now. It encompasses a diverse array of techniques whereby each offers unique advantages and limitations. Let's take a quantitative approach, for instance. It employs standardized instruments to collect numerical data amenable to statistical analysis. I should believe by now shouldn't be a surprise, or it should not be a news anymore, that when we are talking about quantitative research or anything quantitative, it has to do with the statistics. It has to do with statistics and numerical aspects. So quantitative approach now, it has to do with a standardized instruments that collects numerical data amenable to statistical analysis. Now qualitative, for the other, just as we know that quantitative, the opposite of qualitative is quantitative. Now so it just means the opposite of this quantitative approach. On the other hand, qualitative methods, it prioritize depth of understanding through flexible interactive data collection processes that capture complexity, that can capture complexity, that capture context and meaning in human experience. Qualitative research is the opposite, like direct opposite of quantitative. This type doesn't have to do with statistics or numerics. It mainly has to do with interactive data collection process. It has to do with it is more in-depth and flexible, and it captures more complexity and context. It has to do with the context of the happenings and meaning in human experience. So now let's look at primary data collection now. It involves gathering original information directly from sources through methods such as surveys. I believe you should know what surveys are. Interviews, observation, or experiments. So those are primary data collection. It has to do with direct gathering of information, of original information from the main source, which could be from the survey. If you're asking for information from someone and it is survey, probably online, the participant is the one directly answering. Or if it could be interviews, we are conducting interview for some set of people or for some students in a particular place. You will definitely be interviewing the students directly, not that someone will help you interview, or the students will answer the interview through someone or through another medium or platform like that. So now we have the development and validation of data collection instruments. It constitutes a critical aspect of research methodology, which is what we should know. Now let's look at where does your data come from. That is, we're looking at primary data versus secondary data. So by now, after when we are done with this subtopic, we will be able to know where our data come from. Probably maybe it is from the primary source or the secondary source. So sometimes they call it primary source of data and secondary source, while some scholars refer to it as primary data and secondary data. So now primary data, just like we have mentioned in our previous subtopic, that it is the original information that you collect first and for your specific study. It is more certified and recognized because it is coming directly and it is original, that is being collected from the participant first, directly from your participant. So examples are your own survey, your own interviews, your own experiments, just like we mentioned before. So now let's look at the pros and cons. The pros is that it fits perfectly for your research question and you control the quality of it. You as a researcher, you be the driver that controls mainly these types of data collection, primary data. And the cons is that it is time consuming, yes, and it is expensive, logistically challenging as well. So it is time consuming. The time that you will take to go and be interviewing some set of people, you could have easily looked for some other secondary data that is also reliable. But yes, that's the difference. That's the only challenges and the cons that we can see, that it is time consuming and expensive. You have to spend some money to probably print or to reach out, move around, to interview people. It takes a whole lot of it costs a whole lot of money. Sorry. So now let's move on to the secondary data. This, if secondary data, on the other hand, it refers to the existing information that is collected by others for other purposes. Just like we have primary, that it is collected directly by the researcher. Secondary data is not directly collected by the researcher, but indirectly, it is an existing information. The data is already there, and it is existing already, and it is collected by other researchers for other purpose, but you just try to use it to direct the data to the direction of your own research. Probably the person used the data to analyze how would I put it? Probably the person used the data to analyze a particular subject matter. So you can also use the same data, now redirecting it to your own research to analyze something else entirely. So this is secondary, an instance of secondary data. The example of this could be government census, you understand, organizational records, public data sets, or other researchers' data. Now, pros and cons of it, like it is cost effective, it is efficient, and enables longitudinal or large scale studies. And the cons is that it may not perfectly fit your needs. Quality depends on you, and I know. So let's look at the questionnaire. Which is a call to when we are talking about data collection questionnaire. So let's under question this, we'll be looking at designing for clarity and reliability. A standardized set of written questions to collect data from many respondents is what we refer to as questionnaire. It will be standard, as it is a standardized set of written questions to collect data from many respondents, which could be many. You can just, a typical example of this is in a situation where you just see people handling questionnaires to maybe students in a classroom to help them to answer some question that is relatable to their settings. You understand? So now question types. Let's look at the different question types. We have close-ended, we have the open-ended. Close-ended is this is the predetermined answers, e.g. example of that is multiple choice, like scale, and it is very easy to analyze. And on the other hand, we have the open-ended types. The respondents answer in their own course, they capture depth and harder to analyze. You understand? This is just like we can a good example of the close-ended is the type that has multiple choice, maybe whereby the people answering, the respondents just have to tick a particular answer, and you can easily analyze your research based on the answers that they picked. But on the other hand, when the respondents are actually answering in their own code, this will capture depth. It will go way longer, and even it may look harder to analyze. It appears harder to analyze. Sorry. Now let's look at the key design principles. We have one is clear wording. It is simple and unambiguous language. Make sure you use simple and unambiguous language. Neutral question, that is, you try to avoid leading or bias phrasing. And you express logical flow in the sense that you start easy, group related topics, save sensitive demographics for last. Then pilot test, that is, always test your questionnaire on a small group first to catch problems. Now let's look at administering your questionnaire. Now, how do we administer your questionnaire? That is the part where we choose the right mode. One is let's look at this. We have mode, best for, and the key consideration. Let's take, if the mode is an online or web, it is always best for large geographically dispersed samples and fast results. Where in a situation whereby it is in person, that is physically, it appears to be a complex of this low literacy populations and building rapports. And if it is a telephone, it's quick national samples and structured interviews. Or if it is a mail, if your questionnaire is coming from, it is the older populations, areas with poor internet mainly. So you try to choose based on your population resources and the nature of your questions. Now the key consideration to look at when we are trying to administer our questionnaire, in case if it is online, you try to be mobile friendly design, create potential exclusion of those without internet. You understand? And if it is in person, it is always high cost interviewer training needed before we can proceed, and potential for interviewer bias and the likes. The mail is very slow, low response rate, no interviewer clarification and the like. So let's move on to the art of the interview now. When we're talking about the art of the interview, what does it mean? It means gathering deep and qualitative insights. So the purpose of this is to explore experiences, perceptions, and meanings in the participant's own world. So let's look at the types of interviews. Now we have structured, semi-structured, and unstructured as the different types of interview. So this is still on the art of the interview. Structured interview, they are identical questions for all. The consistency is high and less depth. Semi-structured, it is flexible guide with core questions and proofs. And unstructured is conversational, participant, and it is participant-led, whereby we have maximum depth and hard to compare. So we also have the interviewers toolkits, which could, when we're talking about interviewers toolkits, these are active listening. As an interviewer, you must be able to listen very well and carefully. You must be a good listener, building rapport, and using effective proofs. And like, can you tell me more about that? These are the effective proofs that are one of the toolkits for interviewers. Now let's move on to the building your interview guide. Your interview guide is your roadmap for rich conversations, and to do that, you have to craft open-ended questions by starting with how, what, or tell me about. Not yes or yes or no. Yes, you understand? Not that you ask question and go yes or no, and the respondent might be like yes, no. Then the questions die there. But instead, you craft open-ended questions like asking how do you go about it? What do you think will be so tell me about your blah blah blah. You understand? So now let's and when we are talking about building your interview guide, which is you have to structure the flow in the sense that you have the opening, the core, and the closing. The opening, you try to build rapport with easy and introductory questions. Make sure engage them, let them feel free. Then the core is explore key research topics in a logical sequence or in a logical manner. And closing, you ask final reflection like is there anything we haven't discussed? Is there anything you would like to add to that? or something like that. Then you prepare for probes in the sense that you anticipate follow-up questions to dig deeper. If for instance, you can say, can you give me an example about that? So now let's look at observational methods, that is seeing what people actually do. The purpose of this is to systematically watch and record behaviors, watch and record interactions or events in their natural setting. You understand? Uh, this is another method. You have to a situation like this is whereby you systematically watch and even record behaviors or interactions or a way an event is going on in their natural setting without the others knowing. So the key types is one is participant observation. Participant observation. As a researcher will try to join the group being studied, deep insider view and potential bias. And the non-participant observation is that researcher watches from the outside. This will, by doing this, will be more objective with less context. Then we have the observer's challenge, which is the activity and observer bias. So let's move on to leveraging secondary data now. That this has to do with finding good in existing sources. You know, the source is already there, it is existing, but you want to try and leverage it. That is finding good in what is already existing. So major sources could be governments and NGOs, that's non-governmental organizations. It could be research repositories. It could be organizational records. It could be digital traces. You understand? So when we're talking about government and NGOs, it has to do with major sources from them could be census data, it could be health statistics or economic reports. From where research repositories, it could be archived data set from other studies, e.g. we have ICPSR. It could be also be organizational records, which could be company reports, meeting minutes, and performance data. And fourthly, it could be that digital traces, social media data, website analytics that is used with ethical caution. Now, critical evaluation checklist. Sorry, when we're talking about critical evaluation checks, we have to look at the relevance to your question, accuracy and credibility, timeliness, and clear documentation of original methods. Now, let's move on to the pillars of quality, that is validity and reliability. In that it has to do with ensuring your instruments measure well. So validity does your tool measure what's supposed to measure? That is, example, does your job satisfaction survey really capture satisfaction or just general happiness? So if you're carrying out a job satisfaction survey, the question is that is the survey capturing satisfaction, job satisfaction really like valid? It has to do with validity. Now we also have reliability, and this you have to look at the fact that does your tool produce consistent results? Example is that if you measure the same thing twice under similar conditions, do you get the same score? Do you get the same answer or result? So you need both a tool that can be reliable but not valid. We are consistently measuring the wrong thing, and a valid tool must be reliable. So now let's move on to checking reliability, checking validity and reliability. So this has to do with how to provide evidence or how to prove evidence. So for validity, you check context validity, construct validity, and criterion validity. So for content validity, the experts agree the questions cover the full concept. And for construct validity, scores correlate with related measures and the likes. For reliability also, we have internal consistency, test, retest, and we have interrogator. So do all items in a single hang together. Where we have for test retest, same score over time for a stable trait. So when you try to you retest and it's still bringing out same score. So we have interrogator, different observers or coders they agree to this. And we have writing your methodology section. In writing methodology, transparency is very essential and it is the key. Your report must be clearly explained, that is how you collected the data so others can evaluate and replicate your work. I believe we've discussed about it in the previous module as well. Essential details to include in writing your methodology section is one, the instrument description, validity and reliability evidence, the procedures, the pilot testing, and the ethical safeguards. When talking about instrument description, you have to talk about what tool did you use, the names of the items, sample questions, scoring, and the like. So I'm talking about validity and the likes. You have to report statistics, e.g., equals to 85, or cite previous validation studies. Procedures could be who collected the data, when and where, how were participants recruited and consented in collecting the data. That is the process that you took in collecting the data. The pilot testing has to do with, did you test and refine your tools, describe the process and the likes. So now let's look at the common pitfall and how to avoid them. So this has to do with mistakes that determine your data. One is leading questions. Don't you agree that X is terrible? Use neutral phrasing. Questionnaire that is too long, it causes fatigue and dropouts. So you make sure your questionnaire is focused and short. Poor interview techniques are also one of the common pitfalls. And to avoid this, you have to talk more than listen. You have to do the talking more than listen. Proactive, active listening, and ignoring reactivity in observation. And the way to go about it to avoid it is use arbitration or unobstructed methods. And another pitfall is using unvalidated tools. To avoid this is always pilot test and check reliability or validity. Another pitfall is incomplete methodology description. And to avoid that, you have to be thorough. Imagine someone else needs to repeat your study. Always maybe someone else is coming to repeat your study, so you have to be thorough about it. Now, let's move on to from collection to analysis. So when we have collected our data, the next step that we have is analysis, which is what we're looking at. When we have so how do we do this? Which is the next. This is the next steps after data is being collected. One, you have to prepare data preparation. Clean your data, check for errors, code, open-ended responses. And number two is database management. Store data securely and systematically. Analysis alignment. Ensure your planned statistical or thematic analysis matches your data type. Reflexivity, that's qualitative. You try to document your own role and potential biases as the researcher. Triangulation, lastly, you use multiple data sources or methods to check or to cross-check findings. In conclusion, which is the key takeaways and final thoughts. Your data is the foundation to your analysis. It should be on your mind every day, anytime. So the choice of method is strategic and it is driven by your research question. The primary data here, it offer controls, while secondary data on the other hand offer efficiencies and scale. Questionnaires is there to provide breadth, interviews and observation. And observation provide depth. Now, validity and reliability are non-negotiable checks on your instrument quality. So there is no perfect method, only the most appropriate one is okay. It's just left to you to decide the one that is appropriate for your research and it will be more efficient. Thank you. This is then for this mode. We'll be moving on. We'll be meeting